And now let's bring in our Star Monday panel. Joining me on set, Joe Hildebrand,
Hello.
Daily Telegraph columnist. Great to see you.
Sharon? Great to see you.
And then in Canberra, Andrew Carswell, Headline advisory firm and former press secretary to Scott Morrison. Great to see you both. Look, let's start with the big political disagreement or fight of the day. Peter Dutton's proposal to allow job seekers to work more hours, 5 to 10 more hours, before they lose their welfare benefits. This would allow people who are unemployed to earn, or not fully employed, to earn an extra $150 or so a fortnight without losing their benefits. Joe Hildebrand, this is the sort of idea you would expect Labor to put forward.
Right. Isn't it great?
Not Peter Dutton in his budget reply speech.
I love opposites day.
And look, it's interesting because Amanda Rishworth seemed to rule it out yesterday pretty firmly. Jim Chalmers is leaving the door open. Jeff Chambers, who I had on the show earlier, thinks that this might have been an idea the government was looking at anyway, and Peter Dutton's got a whiff of it and come out there and suggested it.
Yeah, it sounds a bit like that, doesn't it? And it's the sort of thing that I think Labor probably should embrace and would instinctively embrace, although I do love it when Labor says, oh no, that's fiscally irresponsible. How dare you give more money to unemployed people.
Cause more inflation.
Cause more inflation. So good on them for being responsible. But yeah, to me, it's the sort of thing I think that they could easily do, and I dare say they should actually do, because it's clearly a disincentive. And I think part of the problem is that you've got the very case study for this, which is this incredibly unpopular couple on the Sunshine Coast in Queensland, where the guy said that he was actually choosing not to work more hours because it would eat more into his dole. Now, unfortunately,
this is Ray Hadley tore these
guys like, you know,
day.
That's right. I don't know how many holes they had in their body beforehand, but they've got more now. but I think the fact that these guys are now the poster people for that is a real political sort of problem, because you don't want to look like you're doing anything to sort of aid people in their situation. But taking that aside, I think it's something Labor could look at.
Look, Andrew Carswell, putting aside the fact that the budget has just been handed down and this would be an extra cost, is this actually a good idea? I mean, we're near full employment, or we are basically at full employment, depending on how you define it at the moment. It can't get better than this. So, you know, why should they be paid extra money to find a job when there are, you know, a lot of jobs around?
Well, one of the most important things you can do, Shari, in this space is build a bridge between unemployment benefits and employment, and try and attach in any way possible those that are on welfare and who want to work to the workforce, so they can build up their confidence, so they can build up their skill set, so they can build up their resume in their fight to get full employment. So it does work. I mean, the Morrison government introduced it during COVID for those on a pension, to allow them to work extra without being penalised. And look, they're penalised higher than the tax rate of millionaires in Australia. So it needs a bit of flexibility in the way it works, particularly when you're at full employment, where there's a need to get more people working. And here's the way you do that. But policy aside for a minute, 10 out of 10 for Peter Dutton here. I mean, we're sitting here on a Monday night talking about the budget last Tuesday, and we're talking about what
his
Peter
speech
Dutton
was on
wants to talk
Thursday.
about.
Well, that's true. His speech was Thursday night. And it was the case after the budget as well. Yeah, it was the case after the budget as well. I think because Labor's cost of living package had been announced already, the main conversation the day after the budget was handed down, so on the Wednesday, the main conversation, Joe, was whether this was the budget was going to be inflationary. So again, you've seen the opposition, which hasn't been able to really get anything right in the past year. And we're coming up to Albanese's 1-year anniversary as PM, but they have set the agenda.
They have, and I think that came through in today's news poll. So we had, I think, something like 40% of people, 39% or something, said that they thought that the budget would be inflationary. And so everyone's an economist. Like, you can't do a phone around of 4 economists, you can't get them to agree on something. And now Joe Bloggs is saying, oh yes, I've done the numbers. So clearly that is based on that message. But the interesting thing in the news poll...
Partly Chris Richardson's fault. He did 1,000 interviews post-budget saying it was inflationary.
That's exactly right. And then other people have said that it's not. But the interesting thing is, though, that even with all this criticism, and even with more people than not saying that they thought they'd be worse off after this budget, they still gave the government a massive rap. Anthony Albanese's approval ratings went up quite significantly. Labor's massive 2PP and primary were pretty much virtually unchanged. So they clearly think, oh, it's going to hurt, but it's good for us, it's good for the country, and there's light at the end of the tunnel. So they're not punishing Labor for their pain.
Well, and that's fascinating, Andrew. I mean, Anthony Albanese has had one of the best post-election years you can think of. And he's I don't know whether it's luck, whether it's friendly media, or whether he's just doing a good job. Everyone would have a different opinion on that. But look, his honeymoon's lasting a long time.
Well, he hasn't made any significant missteps, and I think that's certainly helped his cause. And he's pursuing things in a very moderate manner as well. There's no arrogance that we're seeing yet. That will come, no doubt. It always does. So we are seeing that extended honeymoon period, and with the budget itself. And the budget was a populist budget. It was they threw money around left, right, and centre. But where it will come unstuck is what was not in the budget. There was no plan to grow the economy. There was no plan to increase investment and encourage investment in the economy, particularly in the sectors that underpinned the success of this budget. So there are some difficulties coming, and it'll be interesting to see how he faces those difficult times in the next couple of months.
You know, Joe, the only place Anthony Albanese looks very arrogant is when he poses on the front cover of magazines. He was on the cover of the Weekend Australian on the weekend, and he pulls that face.
When he first did that GQ or whatever it was during the election campaign, I just said, we want someone to lead the country, not find the Maltese Falcon. You know, like we don't want to close on. But it's interesting, I was thinking of that piece as you were saying, Kazi, because he did make very clear in that interview with The Australian, it was a really good piece of Troy Bramston's, that he was going to be very, very moderate, that he was going to be very, very sort of process-driven, consultative. He was going to be a consensus leader in the spirit of Bob Hawke. And we have seen that, you know, day in, day out, unfailingly throughout his leadership in opposition and since becoming Prime Minister. So if the arrogance is going, you know, if he's not arrogant when he can't seem to get below 55% two-party preferred, I don't know when that arrogance is going to kick in. I'm being really happy with what I've seen so far.
Yeah, well, you always were going to be very happy with him, Joe Hildebrand.
Back that horse early on fixed odds.